Hi, World History. Welcome to U15-L5, World War II Japan Part 1. All right, learning targets. Examine conflicting narratives about the past and identify how these narratives can lead to global conflict. Your job, you're going to watch this Ed puzzle, and you're going to answer any of the questions that are in blue text directly on the Ed puzzle. And of course, if you have any questions, do let your teacher know. We are here to help you. All right, let's talk about Japan. So we've kind of left Japan out of the conversation with World War II so far. So here's a map of modern day Japan. As you will see here, that it is split up into 4 different major islands. And it also has some very important cities that we'll talk about. Of course, today we have Tokyo, which is this incredibly large city. It is important to World War II as well. We have Kyoto, we have Hiroshima, and we have Nagasaki, which we'll talk about when we talk about the atomic bombs. So what do you know about Japan's involvement in World War II? All right, so they are going to be on the opposing side of the Allies. So they're part of the Axis powers, along with Italy and Germany. And just as a reminder, the Allies are France, America, Britain, and the Soviet Union / Russia / the USSR. Whatever you want to call it, means all the same thing. All right, so Japan also suffers from the Great Depression from 1929 into the 1930s. And like I said before, it's not only a US problem, it is a worldwide problem. There is an economic collapse in all of the world because there's declines in consumer demand, financial panics, misguided government policy. It hits Europe, US, Japan, and in Latin America the hardest. The Great Depression, like I said, 1929 into the 1930s, Japan wanted to expand industrialization during this time. In order to make industries, one needs resources to do so. So, Japan ends up invading China and French Indochina, which would be like in the Vietnam era today. After 1929, Japan's military wanted to take over more land in Asia. So in 1931, Japan seizes Manchuria and wants Manchuria for its raw materials. So on this map here, Manchuria is in that red color. Japan wants an empire just like the Western countries have, like Great Britain. So they use something called the Mukden Incident as a justification to invade Manchuria. All right, now I'll explain what the Mukden Incident is. The first thing I want to show you, though, is a map of railroads. So there is one really major railroad that goes through China, and it links throughout Manchuria, and Mukden is located right here on that rail line. So September 19th, 1931, a bunch of Japanese soldiers disguised themselves as Chinese soldiers, and they end up blowing the Manchurian Railway by the city of Mukden. Japan owned that railway. Japan blames the Chinese for blowing up the railroad, although the Japanese government knows it was a bunch of Japanese soldiers dressed up like Chinese soldiers, so it was like this whole like secret plot. So Japan takes Manchuria as their own as a payback, although it was the Japanese the whole time that blew up the railroad and the government knew this. It was just a trick. So the League of Nations, we talked about them briefly at the end of World War I, condemns Japan for taking Manchuria, but the League of Nations does nothing about it. There are no consequences for Japan for doing it. So Japan wants to continue expanding its empire, so Japan leaves the League of Nations. In 1931 until 1945, Japan invades more of China. Chiang Kai-shek, who is the former leader of the Chinese Communist Party, China became communist in 1911, and he didn't want to get involved with Japan at all. So Chiang tried to make a peace talk with Japan. He said, hey, Japan, if I give up northern China, will you not invade anything else? Japan wasn't satisfied with that agreement. So Japan moved south. Chiang and Communist China army fight Japan over the rest of the Chinese territory in the south. So here is a map of the Japanese Empire. So of course we have Japan here. They take over parts of Manchuria. They are now moving south into more southern China, and they eventually want to get down here into French Indochina, which is like Japan, or not Japan, which is like Vietnam and Thailand today. So China versus Japan was known as the Sino-Japanese War. In 1937, Japan takes Beijing, Tianjin, and Shanghai, stations navy on entire eastern Chinese coastline. It blocks trade to China from other countries, so Japan has a complete monopoly on Chinese exports. So, Europe poo-poos Japan's action. They're like, oh, Japan, why do you do that? That's so terrible. But European countries don't do any reprimand towards Japan. There are no consequences. So, Chiang Kai-shek thinks of this really stupid idea. So, to slow the Japanese, Chiang blows up the dam on the Yellow River. The Yellow River, which is one of the major rivers in China, starts flooding. It kills 890,000 Chinese civilians. An additional 5 million Chinese people are now homeless or their homes have been damaged. So here's a picture after the flooding. As you can see, water is up about, well, as tall as these guys are, and people are just like using boats in the middle of the streets. So here is a map of the major rivers. So this is the Yellow River right here. So what are Japan's goals? Why is it trying to dominate Asia? There are 4 goals. First one, they wanted to create a new order in East Asia. Second, create an industrialized society. Third, they want Soviet Siberia. Siberia is located right up here in this kind of green shaded area. Soviet Siberia is important because they have coal, natural gases, diamonds, gold, and iron. And the fourth is to teach Asian countries to be more Western modern. So Japan takes the capital Beijing/Peking in 1937, which is located right here. Britain had a strong business ties in China, and they saw Japan as a threat. Japan attacks French-ruled Indochina in 1940. And again, French Indochina includes things like Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. So you're like, wait a minute. How did Japan team up with Germany and Italy, though? Like, we're talking like way different other sides of the world. All right. So to explain it, we kind of have to think of the phrase, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So let's start with Britain and France. So Britain and France are allies. Okay. They like each other. Britain and France both have a common enemy, and that is Japan, because Japan is trying to take over parts of China and Indochina that France and Britain have like businesses in. Britain and France also have the enemy of Germany. Britain and France also has the enemy of Italy. So Germany, Japan, and Italy all have an idea. They're like, wait a minute. All 3 of us have something in common. Britain and France hates us all. So I think we should all be friends. And that's exactly pretty much how it happened, right? So the Axis powers was then formed between Japan, Germany, and Italy. All right, so this is how the 2 sides of World War II came to be. So we have the Axis powers again with Japan, Italy, and Germany. The allies with France, America, which we'll join in a little bit. We'll talk about that. Britain and the Soviet Union, which also joins in a little bit. So the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo axis becomes known as the Axis powers. They agree no interfering with expansion plans of other nations, and they have a common goal, which is anti-communism. All 3 of them hate communism. So Japan wants resources in French Indochina. So that would include copper, gold, natural gases, iron, and trees. the US is really mad at Japan that they attacked French Indochina because US and France are friends. So, as payback, the US put an oil, metal, and airplane embargo on Japan. An embargo means that they cut off all trading supplies with Japan. This leads to Pearl Harbor in 1941. So, who is running Japan during this time? Emperor Hirohito, which is this dude right here, he is kind of running Japan. He's more of a figurehead. Japan actually still has an emperor today. And then Hideki Tojo was the prime minister. He was really the one calling the shots in World War II. The emperor was just more of a figurehead. All right, so December 7th, 1941. What do y'all know about Pearl Harbor? So Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. It sinks 6 ships, and there's about 3,500 U.S. casualties. Japan surprises the U.S. with kamikaze attacks. So kamikaze means divine wind. It's named after the wind that stopped the Mongol invasion of Japan in the 1200s, which we talked about a little bit really briefly in Unit 6. Kamikazes are airplanes that are loaded with gas, bombs, or other explosives. Pilots would crash planes into a target, like a U.S. ship. Planes and the pilot would blow up and try to kill as many Allied soldiers or simply just sink the ship altogether. Kamikaze crashes would end up sinking a total of 47 Allied ships during the course of World War II. So, the attack of Pearl Harbor was thought up by a Japanese Navy general named Isoroku Yamamoto. So, Isoroku Yamamoto is this dude right here. He actually studied at Harvard as a Navy officer between 1919 and 1921. And he studied under the U.S. Navy in the 1920s. So just to see how, close ties he has with the United States, this is Yamamoto sitting here. This is the U.S. Secretary of the Navy right next to him, and the Chief of U.S. Naval Operations on the other side of the couch. That's pretty impressive. He has some pretty powerful ties to the United States. He hated the U.S. Navy. He thought that they weren't disciplined enough, that he saw that the Navy officers just wanted to play poker. They didn't actually want to strategize. So he learned the strengths and the weaknesses of the U.S. Navy. Yamamoto also funded the project to make the Zero. A Zero is an airplane built by Mitsubishi Company, and it was the fastest plane in 1940. And many of these planes were turned into kamikaze planes. You're probably like, Mitsubishi, like the car company today? Yep, it's the same company, just, kind of a dark past. All right, oil, oil, oil. The reason why Japan attacks the United States is because they put an oil embargo on them. Japan went to war to improve access to oil because they can't expand to be an empire if they don't have the fuel to do it. So the U.S. joins the war. Prior to World War II, U.S. practiced isolationism, so the U.S. saw World War II as a European-Japan conflict, not really a U.S. conflict. They wanted to be isolated from World War II, so they vowed to stay out of World War II, although they were sending supplies to the Allies, kind of the same story as World War I. They also didn't want to provoke either the Allies or the Axis. After Pearl Harbor, the U.S. was super uber mad at Japan that they killed and sank ships. So they joined World War II on December 8th, 1941, which is just the day after Pearl Harbor. They joined the Allies, of course, with Great Britain, Russia, and France. So here's a news headline. It says, U.S. at war, Japan's planes attacked at Pearl Harbor and Manila. So that's how we get the two sides. The Axis, the Japan, Italy, Germany. The Allies, France, America, Britain, and Soviet Union. All right, let's wrap this up. Today we learned about the Axis, the Allies, Pearl Harbor, kamikaze, Isoroku Yamamoto, and isolationism. Next up, you're going to do U15-L6, World War II, Japan Part 2. If you have any questions, comments, or want to learn more, let us know. We're happy to help. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.